I refused to be my sister's free babysitter while caring for our dad with Alzheimer's. My family called me selfish, so I moved out. Now they're begging me to come back. I, 29F, have recently found myself in a complicated family situation that's left me questioning everything. To give you some context, I grew up in a tight-knit family in a small town in Michigan. My parents, Mike, 58M, and Linda, 56F, raised us with strong values of family loyalty and support. I have two sisters, Rachel, 32F, and Sophie, 25F. Growing up, Rachel was always the responsible one. She excelled in school, was captain of the debate team, and knew from a young age that she wanted to be a nurse. Sophie, the baby of the family, was more free-spirited. She loved art and music, and often butted heads with our parents over her unconventional choices. I fell somewhere in the middle, good at school, but also drawn to more creative pursuits. After high school, I left for college in California, eager to experience life outside our small town. I studied education and fell in love with teaching. For the past 5 years, I've been working as a high school English teacher in San Francisco, building a life I truly loved. Everything changed about 8 months ago when my mom called with devastating news. Dad had been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. It was a shock to all of us. Dad had always been the pillar of our family, strong, dependable, with a wicked sense of humor. The thought of him losing his memories and independence was heartbreaking. Without hesitation, I packed up my life in California and moved back home to Michigan. My school was understanding and allowed me to transfer to a local high school, though I had to take a pay cut and lose the seniority I'd built up. It was a sacrifice, but family comes first, right? When I got home, I was surprised to find that Rachel, who lived just 20 minutes away, hadn't made any changes to her life to help out. She was busy with her own family, her husband James, 34M, and their 3 kids, twins Lucy and Liam, 6, and Ethan, 3. Sophie, who had moved to Chicago for art school, couldn't help much either. So, I became Dad's primary caregiver. I reduced my teaching hours to part-time and took on the bulk of the responsibilities. Mom still worked full-time as an accountant, so most of the day-to-day care fell to me. It was challenging, but I was managing. The real problems started about 4 months ago. James lost his job at the local factory where he'd worked for over a decade. It was unexpected and hit their family hard. Rachel had to pick up extra shifts at the hospital to make ends meet, which meant they needed more help with childcare. At first, it was just occasional requests. Rachel would ask if I could watch the kids for a few hours here and there. I was happy to help. I love my niece and nephews, and I knew they were going through a tough time. But over the weeks, the requests became more frequent and less polite. Rachel started assuming I'd be available whenever she needed me. There was one particularly bad week last month that pushed me to my breaking point. It started on Monday when Rachel called at 6 a.m., saying she'd been called into work for an emergency shift and needed me to take the kids to school. I had to reschedule a doctor's appointment I'd made for Dad, but I did it. On Wednesday, she dropped the kids off unannounced after school, saying she and James had a counseling session. I had planned to take Dad to the park that afternoon, one of the few activities he still enjoys, but I had to cancel. Friday was the last straw. I had plans to meet my boyfriend, Alex, 30M, for dinner. It was going to be our first real date in weeks. Alex has been incredibly understanding about my situation, but I knew our relationship was suffering from the lack of quality time together. An hour before I was supposed to leave, Rachel showed up with all 3 kids, saying she and James needed a date night to work on their marriage. I tried to explain that I had plans, but Rachel brushed me off, saying, "It's just dinner, Em. You can reschedule. This is important for my marriage." She left before I could argue further. I was furious and hurt. I called Alex and canceled our date, again. He was understanding, but I could hear the disappointment in his voice. As I sat there, watching cartoons with the kids while Dad napped in his recliner, I realized something had to change. The following week, Rachel called asking if I could take the kids for the entire weekend. She and James wanted to go to a marriage retreat, and her usual backup, a neighbor, was out of town. I took a deep breath and firmly said no. Rachel was shocked. "What do you mean, no? We really need this, Emma. Don't you care about my marriage?" I explained that while I cared about her and the kids, I couldn't be her on-call babysitter anymore. I reminded her that I moved home to care for Dad, not to be her free childcare service. I suggested she look into hiring a regular babysitter or asking James's parents for help. Rachel didn't take it well. She accused me of being selfish and not caring about family. She brought up how she'd always helped me when we were younger, conveniently forgetting the many times I'd covered for her or helped her with school projects. The argument escalated, and Rachel ended up calling our mom, painting me as the bad guy. Mom sided with Rachel, saying that family helps family and then that I should be more willing to pitch in. Even Sophie, who rarely gets involved in family drama, texted me saying I was being too harsh. I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, but now I'm wondering if I overreacted. The stress of caregiving for Dad and constantly babysitting is wearing me down, and I feel like I'm losing my own life in the process. I'm considering moving out, even though it would make caring for Dad more difficult, just to regain some control over my life. Last night, I broke down crying while talking to Alex on the phone. He suggested I look into hiring professional help for Dad, but I know we can't afford it. I'm at a loss. I love my family, but I feel like I'm drowning. I can't help but think about the life I left behind in California. My students, my friends, the independence I had. Don't get me wrong, I don't regret coming home to help Dad, but I never expected to become everyone's crutch. Am I the asshole for refusing to babysit and considering moving out? How do I balance my responsibilities to my family with my own needs and desires? I feel guilty even thinking about prioritizing myself, but I'm worried that if something doesn't change, I'm going to end up resenting everyone. Update 1. It's been about 3 weeks since my original post, and I wanted to update you all on what's been happening. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and advice. It really helped me gain perspective on the situation and gave me the courage to take action. After my confrontation with Rachel, things were tense in the family for a while. Mom kept trying to guilt me into apologizing, bringing up stories from our childhood about how we always stuck together. She reminded me of the time Rachel stayed up all night to help me finish a science project in 8th grade, or how she drove 3 hours to pick me up when my car broke down in college. I felt terrible, but I knew I had to stand my ground. I had a long talk with my boyfriend, Alex, about the situation. He's been my rock through all of this, despite the strain it's put on our relationship. He reminded me of who I was before all this started, the passionate teacher who loved introducing her students to Shakespeare, the woman who ran 5Ks on weekends and volunteered at the local animal shelter. He pointed out that I'd lost myself in trying to be everything for everyone else. Alex suggested I have a family meeting to clear the air, and after some hesitation, I agreed. I spent a week planning what I wanted to say, writing and rewriting my thoughts. Finally, last Saturday, I called a family meeting. Everyone gathered in our parents' living room, Mom, Dad, though he dozed off halfway through, which is becoming more common these days, Rachel, James, Sophie, who drove in from Chicago, and me. I took a deep breath and started by thanking everyone for coming. Then, I calmly explained my position. I talked about how I'd left my life in California to come help, and how I didn't regret that decision, but that the current situation wasn't sustainable. I detailed how the constant babysitting was affecting my ability to care for Dad and maintain my own life. I brought up specific incidents, the missed doctor's appointments for Dad, the canceled dates with Alex, the sleepless nights trying to grade papers after a day of caregiving and childminding. To my surprise, James spoke up first. His voice was gruff with emotion as he admitted that he and Rachel had been taking advantage of the situation and relying too heavily on family for childcare. He revealed that he'd been struggling with depression since losing his job, which was part of the reason for their marital issues. He talked about feeling like a failure as a provider and a father, and how that had led him to withdraw from family responsibilities. He apologized for not being more present as a father and promised to step up. Rachel was quieter at first, but as James spoke, I saw tears forming in her eyes. When it was her turn to speak, her voice shook as she explained how overwhelmed she'd been feeling. She talked about the pressure of being the primary breadwinner, the stress of her nursing job during these difficult times, and her fears about her marriage falling apart. She admitted that she'd been unfair to me, using me as a crutch instead of addressing the real issues in her life. She apologized, saying she hadn't realized how much her actions were hurting me. Sophie, who had previously sided with Rachel, surprised me by speaking up in my defense. She shared that she'd been feeling guilty for not helping more with Dad's care and realized how much pressure I'd been under. She talked about her own struggles, how she'd been working 2 jobs in Chicago to make ends meet while trying to build her art career, and how she'd felt torn between her dreams and her family obligations. She offered to start coming home 1 weekend a month to give me a break. Mom was the hardest to convince. She still insisted that family should always come first, bringing up how her own mother had sacrificed everything to raise her and her siblings. But after hearing everyone out, she grudgingly agreed that the current situation wasn't sustainable. She admitted that she'd been in denial about how much care Dad really needed, and how unfair it was to expect me to handle everything. After hours of emotional discussion, we finally came up with a plan. Rachel and James would enroll the kids in an after-school program 3 days a week. They'd hire a part-time nanny for the other 2 weekdays. I agreed to watch the kids 1 Saturday a month to give them a date night, but with at least a week's notice. Sophie would come home 1 weekend a month to help with Dad, giving me a full weekend off. Mom would try to adjust her work schedule to be home earlier 2 days a week. We'd all chip in to hire a professional caregiver to come a few hours each week, giving me some respite. We also discussed the importance of respecting boundaries and communicating better as a family. It was a long and sometimes emotional conversation, but I felt like we made real progress. After the meeting, Rachel pulled me aside and apologized personally. She admitted that she'd been jealous of my relatively free lifestyle compared to her busy life as a mom, which had led her to take advantage of my time. She talked about how she sometimes resented giving up her travel dreams to settle down and have kids, even though she loved her family. We ended up hugging and crying together, truly reconnecting as sisters for the first time in months. I'm cautiously optimistic about this new arrangement. It's only been a week, but so far, everyone's sticking to the plan. I've already noticed a significant decrease in my stress levels. I was able to take Dad to his favorite park twice this week, and I had an uninterrupted date night with Alex where we didn't talk about family drama at all. There have been a few hiccups. Rachel called in a panic one day when the nanny was late, and I could tell she wanted to ask me to take the kids. But she caught herself and found another solution. It's progress. I'm still considering the possibility of moving out in the future, but for now, I'm willing to give this new setup a chance. I've started looking into online teaching opportunities, thinking that might give me more flexibility in the future. Thank you all again for your support and advice. It really gave me the strength to stand up for myself and work towards a better situation for everyone. I'll update again if there are any significant developments. Update 2. It's been about 2 months since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have been going. Overall, the situation has improved, but we've had some bumps along the way. The good news first, Rachel and James have been sticking to the childcare plan we agreed on. The kids are enjoying their after-school program, and the part-time nanny they hired, a retired teacher named Mrs. Johnson, is working out well. The kids adore her, and she's been a great help with their homework. I've been babysitting one Saturday a month as agreed, and it's actually been nice to spend quality time with my niece and nephews without feeling overwhelmed. Sophie has been coming home one weekend a month as promised, which has been a huge help. It's given me a chance to have a full weekend off, and I've been using that time to reconnect with old friends and spend time with Alex. Mom has also managed to adjust her schedule to be home earlier 2 days a week, which has taken some pressure off me. The professional caregiver we hired, a kind woman named Maria, has been coming 3 afternoons a week. She's been wonderful with Dad, and it's been a relief to have someone with experience to consult about his care. Now for the challenges we faced. About 3 weeks ago, James got a job offer. It was great news for their family, but it threw a wrench in our childcare plans. The job required him to work some evenings and weekends, which meant they needed to adjust their schedules again. Rachel approached me about picking up some extra babysitting shifts, but I held firm to our agreement. Instead, I helped her look into flexible childcare options, and they ended up finding a babysitting service that can accommodate their changing needs. There was also an incident with Dad that tested our new family dynamic. He had a bad day and wandered out of the house while I was in the shower. Thankfully, our neighbor, Mr. Peterson, found him 3 blocks away and brought him back safely, but it shook everyone up. Rachel immediately offered to take time off work to help out, which I appreciated, but I could tell she was hoping I'd offer to watch her kids in exchange. Instead, I thanked her for the offer and suggested we look into respite care options for Dad. This led to a family discussion about Dad's increasing needs. We all sat down one evening after the kids were in bed, and Mom finally admitted that she'd been in denial about how quickly Dad's condition was progressing. It was a difficult conversation, full of tears and fears for the future, but it was necessary. We decided to look into adult daycare programs for Dad, which would provide him with social interaction and activities while giving me more free time during the day. On a personal note, my relationship with Alex has been thriving now that I have more time and energy to invest in it. We've been talking about moving in together, which brings me to a decision I've made. I'm planning to move out of my parents' house in the next few months. I know this might sound selfish, but I've realized that I need to prioritize my own life and future. I've talked to Mom about it, and while she's not thrilled, she understands. We're working on a plan to ensure Dad will be well cared for with a combination of professional help, family support, and my regular visits. Rachel was surprisingly supportive when I told her about my decision to move out. I think she's realized how much I've sacrificed over the past year and wants to see me happy. She's even offered to take Dad for a weekend each month to give Mom a break. I'm feeling cautiously excited about this new chapter in my life. It's been a challenging journey, but I think our family has grown stronger through this experience. We're communicating better, respecting each other's boundaries more, and finding a balance between supporting each other and maintaining our individual lives. I've also made some positive changes in my professional life. I've started taking an online course in special education, thinking it might be helpful both for my teaching career and for understanding Dad's needs better. My principal at school has been supportive, and we're discussing the possibility of me leading a workshop for other teachers on supporting students who have family members with Alzheimer's. I'll post one more update after I've moved out to let you know how things are going. Thank you all again for your support and advice throughout this process. Update 3. It's been about 4 months since my last update, and I wanted to share the final developments in this story. I've officially moved out of my parents' house and in with Alex, and I'm happy to report that things have generally been going well. The week before I moved out was emotionally charged. Mom had a bit of a meltdown, worrying that Dad's care would suffer without me there full time. We had a long, tearful conversation where I reassured her that I wasn't abandoning them, just changing the nature of my support. I reminded her of all the plans we'd put in place and how everyone had stepped up over the past few months. Moving day itself was a mix of excitement and guilt. As I packed up my childhood room, I found old photos and mementos that brought back memories of happier times with Dad. It was bittersweet, but it also reinforced my decision to start this new chapter of my life. We've settled into a new routine now. A professional caregiver comes to help with Dad 5 days a week, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I visit 3 times a week, twice on weekdays after work and once on weekends for a longer visit. Sophie has stepped up and now visits twice a month for long weekends. Rachel and James take Dad for 1 weekend a month, giving Mom a break. We hired a cleaning service to come once a week, which has been a huge help for Mom. Dad attends an adult daycare program 3 days a week, which he seems to enjoy. There have been some unexpected positive outcomes from this change. Mom has started attending a support group for spouses of Alzheimer's patients, which she finds incredibly helpful. She's made new friends who understand what she's going through, and it's given her an outlet for her fears and frustrations. She's also rekindled some old friendships now that she has a bit more free time. Rachel and I have grown closer. She's been much more respectful of my time and boundaries since I moved out. Last week, she called just to chat and catch up, something we haven't done in years. She even apologized again for how she treated me before, saying that seeing me prioritize my own life inspired her to work on her marriage in a healthier way. As for me, I feel like I can breathe again. Living with Alex has been wonderful, and I'm enjoying having a life outside of caregiving. We've started a small container garden on our balcony, something I've always wanted to do but never had the time for. I've also joined a local book club, which has been a great way to meet new people and indulge my love of literature. Professionally, things are looking up too. I've completed my online course in special education, and my principal has approved my proposal for a workshop series on supporting students with family members with Alzheimer's. I'm excited about this new direction in my career. There are still hard days, of course. Dad's condition continues to progress, and it's painful to watch. Last week, he didn't recognize me when I visited, which was heartbreaking. But I feel like our family is in a much better position to handle these challenges now. We're communicating better, supporting each other in more sustainable ways, and taking care of our own needs as well. I want to thank this community once again for all your support and advice throughout this journey. You helped me find the courage to set boundaries and prioritize my own well-being, which ultimately led to a healthier situation for everyone in my family. To anyone out there struggling with similar family caregiving situations, I hope my story can offer some encouragement. It's possible to support your family without losing yourself in the process. It takes courage, communication, and sometimes tough decisions, but it's worth it in the end.